Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In a stark and forceful response to the Kremlin's New Year rhetoric of relentless war, Ukraine has executed one of the most expansive aerial offensives against Russian territory since the invasion began, targeting the very heart of Russia's strategic infrastructure and symbolic centers of power. Over a tense 24-hour period, Ukrainian forces launched a coordinated swarm of approximately 95 unmanned aerial vehicles against targets spanning from the Baltic Sea coast near St. Petersburg to occupied Crimea in the Black Sea. The scale and reach of the attack, conducted in the depths of winter, demonstrate a formidable and growing capability to project force deep behind enemy lines, directly challenging President Vladimir Putin's narrative of a secure homeland and a controlled military operation. The primary target of this audacious operation was the Luga oil and gas terminal on the Baltic Sea, a critical export hub operated by the Russian energy giant Novatek, vital for processing gas condensate into fuels. Secondary waves of drones struck military and logistical sites in the Black Sea region of Crimea, including the port city of Sevastopol, and in the Russian oblasts of Bryansk, Orel and Kursk. Initial reports from Russian authorities confirm interceptions and incidents, but widespread geolocated social media footage and satellite imagery analysis reveal significant fires and damage at the Luga facility, indicating a major success for Ukrainian planners. This operation signifies a pivotal shift in the conflict, moving beyond the attritional trench warfare in the east and south towards a concerted campaign to degrade Russia's economic stamina and military logistics network at its source. The execution of such a complex multi-front drone assault required overcoming immense geographical and defensive hurdles. The distance from Ukrainian-controlled territory to the Luga terminal exceeds 1,000 kilometers, a journey requiring drones with exceptional range and endurance. Analysis by military experts suggests the use of domestically produced Ukrainian models like the UJ-22 airborne or modified Aeropract-22 light aircraft transformed into lower, servable one-way attack drones. These platforms, often constructed with commercially available navigation systems and engines, represent a cost-effective and innovative asymmetric strategy against Russia's costly layered air defenses. The flight paths for these drones likely involved carefully plotted routes to exploit topographical cover, such as river valleys, and to navigate perceived gaps in Russia's radar coverage, which is denser around Moscow and key military installations, but potentially thinner over vast stretches of forest and rural landscape. The winter conditions played a dual role. While posing challenges for drone operations with icing risks and poor visibility, they also potentially degraded the effectiveness of some Russian short-range air defense systems and provided long hours of darkness for concealment. The simultaneous nature of the attacks, striking in the north, southwest, and south nearly concurrently, was a deliberate tactic to saturate and confuse Russian air defense command centers, preventing them from concentrating resources on any single axis of approach. The historical context of this strike places it at the apex of an escalating campaign of deep strikes that has defined the latter half of 2023. Ukrainian efforts to strike within Russia have evolved from sporadic symbolic attacks in the war's early months to a systematic intelligence-driven program targeting airfields, fuel depots, and manufacturing plants. The breakthrough attack on the Kerch Strait Bridge in October 2022 proved the psychological and tangible impact of such operations. The recent holiday period has seen a brutal acceleration of this strategy. This massive drone wave follows a devastating Ukrainian artillery strike on the Russian city of Belgorod on December 30th, and comes in direct retaliation for Russia's own large-scale missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities throughout the New Year period. This reciprocal escalation has effectively erased any remaining notion of sanctuary, establishing a grim new normal where the war's violence regularly penetrates the borders of both nations. The timing just after Putin's New Year address is unmistakably symbolic, serving as Kiev's forceful rebuttal to messages of Russian resilience and inevitable victory, and demonstrating that Ukrainian strategic planning operates on its own timeline, independent of the Kremlin's political calendar. The immediate political implications within Russia are severe, presenting a direct challenge to the competency and control of the Putin presidency. The successful attack on a major energy asset mere kilometers from Putin's hometown of St. Petersburg is a profound embarrassment, undermining the state's fundamental promise of security and stability. It exposes critical vulnerabilities in a national defense apparatus that has consumed vast budgetary resources for decades. The event will inevitably trigger fierce internal recriminations. The Ministry of Defense, already a target of scathing criticism from influential pro-war military bloggers and figures like the late Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin for tactical failures in Ukraine, will now face intense scrutiny for its failure to protect the homeland. The powerful Federal Security Service, or FSB, responsible for counterintelligence and border security, will also be under pressure to explain how the planning for such a large-scale operation evaded detection. This failure amplifies existing tensions between Russia's competing security structures, the military, intelligence agencies, and National Guard, as a blame game ensues, threatening the fragile cohesion of the ruling elite. For the Russian population, the attack delivers a psychological shock, particularly to urban centers like St. Petersburg that have been largely insulated from the war's direct effects. It makes the conflict tangible and immediate, potentially eroding passive support and fostering an undercurrent of anxiety about the state's ability to manage a crisis that is now demonstrably breaching its own frontiers. Economically, the strike is a deliberate attempt to strike at the financial engine of the Russian state and its war machine. The Luga terminal is a linchpin in Russia's energy export chain, processing stable gas condensate into marketable products like naphtha, jet fuel, and gas oil. While Novit stated a fire was quickly localized, any disruption to operations at such a key node has immediate and longer-term repercussions. It introduces a new and potent risk factor for global energy traders and insurers dealing with Russian hydrocarbons, potentially complicating logistics and forcing discounts due to heightened physical security concerns. Beyond the immediate damage, the attack signals to international markets that no part of Russia's energy infrastructure is safe, imposing a de facto risk premium on the entire sector. Furthermore, the defensive cost for Russia is monumental. The Kremlin is now forced to consider redeploying sophisticated and expensive air defense systems such as the S-400 or Panzer S-1 from the front lines in Ukraine, or from guarding other critical national assets to protect thousands of kilometers of pipelines, refineries, and export terminals. This strategic diversion of resources is a significant, if indirect, victory for Ukraine, forcing Russia to defend its entire economic geography, a financially draining and logistically nightmarish proposition. The attack moves the conflict into the realm of economic attrition, where Ukraine aims to make the long-term cost of the war unsustainable for the Russian treasury by systematically targeting the revenue streams that fill it. Is less than end of thinking. Is greater than continue. Part 2. The social consequences within Russia, though meticulously filtered through state-controlled media, are unfolding in subtle but significant ways. The official narrative has been swift, emphasizing the interception of most drones and downplaying the material impact, while labeling the attacks as acts of terrorism orchestrated by Western intelligence. However, the digital age circumvents total information control. Footage of the intense blaze at the Luga terminal, shared across Telegram channels and social media platforms, provides a visceral counter-narrative to official assurances for citizens in major metropolitan areas like St. Petersburg, a city with a historically European outlook and a less fervently pro-war demographic. The realization that a key industrial target in their region was successfully attacked introduces a new and unsettling layer of reality. This erodes the perceived distance between the special military operation and daily life, potentially transforming abstract support into tangible anxiety. The Kremlin faces a delicate balancing act, leveraging the attacks to foster a siege mentality and rally patriotic sentiment, while simultaneously managing the public's growing realization of vulnerability. This dynamic risks exacerbating existing social fissures, potentially accelerating the brain drain of skilled professionals and fostering a quiet, pervasive war weariness that undermines the social contract of stability in exchange for political acquiescence. Internationally, the drone offensive has elicited a spectrum of reactions that mirror the global geopolitical divide over the war. Ukraine's Western backers have maintained a consistent, if carefully worded, position. They do not directly enable strikes on Russian soil, but unequivocally recognize Ukraine's inherent right to self-defense under the UN Charter. The demonstrated sophistication and strategic impact of this deep strike campaign will undoubtedly intensify private discussions within NATO capitals about further easing restrictions on weaponry that could enhance such capabilities, seeing them as a legitimate means for Ukraine to degrade Russia's ability to wage war. For nations in the global south, the event is another day, a point in the ongoing reassessment of Russian military power and resilience, potentially influencing their diplomatic and economic hedging strategies. The reactions from Moscow's primary allies, namely Iran and North Korea, are of particular analytical interest, as both are direct suppliers of the drone and missile technology Russia employs. They will be watching to see if their own systems can be effectively neutralized by Ukrainian ingenuity. China, Russia's most powerful strategic partner, is likely to reiterate public calls for peace talks and de-escalation. While its military and political analysts conduct a cold-eyed assessment of the operational vulnerabilities the attacks have exposed on a broader global security level, the event serves as a potent case study in how asymmetric affordable drone technology can challenge the air defense architectures of major military powers, a lesson that is being downloaded and studied by state and non-state actors around the world. Expert analysis of the incident focuses on two interconnected themes: the maturation of Ukrainian drone warfare and the systemic challenges facing Russian air defense. This attack is not a lucky one-off, but the culmination of a year of iterative development. Ukrainian defense industries have rapidly evolved from assembling simple first-person view FPV drones for trench warfare to engineering long-range, navigationally complex systems capable of precision strikes at operational depths. This represents a paradigm shift, allowing Ukraine to partially offset Russia's overwhelming advantage in long-range cruise and ballistic missiles with cheaper, scalable, and replenishable assets. The winter aspect is tactically astute, as poor weather can degrade the performance of optical and infrared tracking systems on some air defense platforms. The apparent difficulty Russia's integrated air defense network had in neutralizing the threat, despite boasting some of the world's most advertised systems like the S-400, points to fundamental issues. These may include an inability to effectively detect low-lying small radar signature drones over long distances, the successful saturation of defensive sectors by coordinated swarms, or critical gaps in coverage that Ukrainian intelligence has identified and exploited. The challenge is no longer intercepting a handful of high V-value missiles, but defending against a persistent distributed swarm of low-cost targets, a dilemma for which Russia's military structured around defending against NATO-style air forces appears inadequately prepared. The trajectory following this event points towards a dangerous and intensifying new phase of the war. In the immediate term, Russia will seek to reinforce its defensive posture, likely by pulling air defense systems from other theaters, including the front lines in Ukraine, thereby creating new vulnerabilities for its ground forces. A predictable wave of internal security crackdowns, arrests on suspicion of sabotage or espionage, and purges within command structures is anticipated as the regime seeks scapegoats and reasserts control. For Ukraine, the proven effectiveness of this strategy validates its continuation and expansion. Future waves can be expected to target other critical energy infrastructure, such as refineries and electrical substations, as well as defense manufacturing sites and key transportation nodes like rail junctions. The strategic aim is to impose a continuous compounding cost on Russia's war economy and societal stability. This sets the stage for a precarious dynamic in the coming months. A Kremlin feeling humiliated and pressured may seek retaliatory escalation in other domains, such as increased cyber attacks against Western infrastructure, more indiscriminate missile campaigns against Ukrainian urban centers, or heightened nuclear saber rattling. The geographical expansion of the conflict, with strikes now routinely penetrating deep into Russian territory, increases the overall risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation, drawing the war into an even more unpredictable and dangerous chapter. Ultimately, the war has expanded beyond the fixed front lines in Donbass. The battlefield now encompasses the oil terminals of the Baltic, the defense factories of the Urals, and the psychological resilience of the Russian public. The massive drone strike is a definitive declaration that Ukraine will not accept a conflict confined to its own territory. It marks the conflict's evolution into a total contest of endurance, where victory will be influenced not only by territorial control, but by the capacity to sustain national industry, protect economic assets, and maintain domestic morale under persistent attack. As winter persists, the conflict is increasingly a war of industrial production, technological innovation, and national will, where attacks like the one on Luga are calculated moves in a long-term strategy to fracture the pillars of Russian power. The central question for the coming year is whether Russia can adapt its vast but seemingly rigid defenses to counter this diffuse and innovative threat, or whether Ukraine's deepening campaign of strategic strikes will succeed in turning Russia's greatest strategic asset, its territorial depth, into its most profound and exhausting vulnerability. The social repercussions within Russia, though carefully managed through state media filters, are penetrating the public consciousness in tangible ways. The official response has followed a predictable pattern. Rapid claims of high interception rates, minimization of physical damage, and accusations of Western-directed terrorism. Yet, the digital era provides cracks in this formational facade. Circulated footage of the ferocious fire at the Luga terminal, alongside reports of explosions in regions like Bryansk and Orel, delivers a visceral, undeniable counter-narrative. For residents of major cities such as St. Petersburg, a cosmopolitan center with historically stronger European ties and a less overtly militaristic population, the successful strike on a significant industrial target in their proximity makes the war palpably close. This erodes the psychological buffer that has allowed many to view the conflict as a distant affair, potentially converting passive acceptance into active anxiety. The Kremlin now navigates a complex propaganda tightrope, exploiting the attacks to foster a fortress Russia siege mentality, while preventing the public's realization of vulnerability from morphing into doubt about the state's competence. This dynamic risks deepening social fractures, potentially encouraging further immigration among the educated middle class, and nurturing a silent, simmering war weariness that undermines the long-standing social contract of guaranteed stability in exchange for political passivity. On the international stage, the drone offensive has triggered a nuanced array of responses, reflecting the entrenched global divisions the war has solidified. Ukraine's Western allies maintain their formal position of not providing weapons specifically designed for strikes on Russian territory, while simultaneously and unequivocally affirming Ukraine's inherent right to self-defense. The demonstrated precision, coordination, and strategic impact of this deep strike campaign, however, are certain to intensify behind scenes debates in European and North American capitals about further loosening restrictions on the range and capability of weaponry sent to Kiev. The logic is clear. Degrading Russia's ability to generate warfighting revenue and logistics inside its own borders is a legitimate and increasingly effective component of Ukraine's defensive strategy. For nations in the global south, the event serves as another benchmark in the ongoing recalibration of Russian power projection. It demonstrates vulnerability and logistical overstretch factors that may influence these countries' diplomatic hedging and arms procurement decisions moving forward. The reactions from Moscow's key partners, Iran and North Korea, will be scrutinized for signs of reassurance or recalculation, as both are directly implicated as suppliers of the very drone and missile technology Russia uses and now struggles to defend against. China, walking its diplomatic tightrope, will likely issue further calls for ceasefire and dialogue while its strategic community conducts a ruthless internal assessment of the operational and systemic weaknesses the attacks have revealed. At a global security level, the incident stands as a stark tutorial in how affordable asymmetric technology can penetrate the defenses of a major conventional military, a lesson noted by defense ministries and non-state actors worldwide. Military and security experts dissecting the event highlight its significance as a milestone in the evolution of modern warfare, underscoring two critical developments: the advanced maturation of Ukrainian unmanned capabilities and the exposed dilemmas in Russian defensive doctrine. This coordinated strike is not an isolated feat, but the logical progression of a year of relentless innovation. Ukraine's defense industrial base has demonstrated an agile capacity to move from manufacturing short-range FPV drones for tactical trench combat to designing, testing, and fielding long-range autonomous systems for strategic effect. This capability partially neutralizes Russia's historical supremacy in long-range missile inventories, creating a sustainable, cost-imposing model of warfare where expensive Russian air defense missiles are used to intercept cheaper Ukrainian drones. The winter timing provided not just cover but a tactical edge, as poor visibility, low cloud ceilings and precipitation can hinder the electro-optical and infrared tracking systems essential for many modern air defense interceptors. The partial success of the drone swarm suggests potential failures in Russia's integrated air defense network. These could include blind spots in low-altitude radar coverage over vast territories, an inability of command systems to effectively prioritize and manage dozens of simultaneous low-signature threats, or a lack of adequate short-range defense systems at critical infrastructure sites themselves. The overarching challenge for Russia is no longer defending against a predictable barrage of high V-value missiles, but maintaining a constant, perimeterless defense against a persistent, adaptable, and distributed swarm of low-cost platforms. Looking ahead, the aftermath of this attack sets conditions for a more volatile and geographically expansive phase of the conflict. In the short term, a significant reorganization of Russian air defense assets is inevitable, likely drawing systems away from the battlefront in Ukraine to protect refineries, ports, and military-industrial sites deep inside Russia. This redistribution could create localized vulnerabilities for Russian ground forces. Domestically, a rigorous internal security purge is probable, with the FSB and military counterintelligence launching sweeping investigations for alleged sabotage and leaks to explain the intelligence and planning failure. For Ukraine, the operational success validates this strategic direction entirely. Future attacks will likely aim for scale, diversity, and persistence, targeting a broader target set including power generation facilities, defense manufacturing plants, and key rail and pipeline nodes to compound systemic strain. This deliberate campaign of internal degradation aims to shake the foundations of Russian political and economic stability over time. This new dynamic, however, carries grave risks of uncontrolled escalation. A Kremlin feeling publicly humiliated and militarily pressured may seek symmetrical retaliation through heightened cyber attacks against Western critical infrastructure, which it perceives as enabling Ukraine, or through further indiscriminate missile terror against Ukrainian civilian populations. The explicit demonstration that the war can be brought to Russian soil with increasing effectiveness also raises the latent, though still low probability risk of tactical nuclear signaling or other forms of unconventional escalation, as Moscow's conventional options appear increasingly frustrated. The conflict has thus entered a period where the front line is everywhere and nowhere, defined less by territory and more by endurance, economic resilience, and technological adaptability, with the potential for sudden violent shifts in intensity and method.